inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So in the purport, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada says, the path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord Himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original supreme spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to the disciplic, to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu shakshat bhagavat pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path, nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. So this is all precious information. There's a little bit more. We're going to explain it. But I want to explain it up until this point where we just stopped. There are certain quintessential qualities of a spiritual master that should be understood. First and foremost is that the spiritual master never claims that he or she is God. And the spiritual master never lets his disciples claim that he is God. Why? Because God is a specific person, and that person is Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the original spiritual master. And therefore, when he spoke the Bhagavad Gita 120 million years ago to Surya Narayana, or Vivaswan, and then he spoke it again over 2 million years ago to Manu, and then he spoke it again 2 million years ago to King Ikshvaku, the first king of the solar dynasty in which Lord Ramachandra appeared. And then again he spoke it 5,000 years ago to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So the history of Bhagavad Gita goes back 120 million years ago. And the same things Krishna spoke 120 million years ago is what Arjuna heard 5,000 years ago. And now, because of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who has given the Bhagavad Gita Yatarup as it is, we're hearing exactly the same Bhagavad Gita today in Prabhupada's version, Prabhupada's translation of the Bhagavad Gita and his purports, that Arjuna heard 5,000 years ago, that King Ikshvaku heard more than 2 million years ago, and what Manu heard more than 2 million years ago, and what Surya or Vivaswan heard 120 million years ago. Nothing has changed in all that time in the Bhagavad Gita. That means it's the truth. The truth is something that's true in the past, the present, and the future. It is not subject to speculation. There's nothing that has to be changed because it's the absolute truth. Why? Because it's spoken originally by Krishna himself. That's why. Krishna is not someone who became God. Krishna has always been God. No one can become God. Either you're God or you're not God. So there are many pretenders today claiming that they are God. There's a long list of them. And they're all phonies. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His Bhagavad Gita gives perfect knowledge. And anyone who wants to be a guru or spiritual master must repeat exactly what Krishna has said 5,000 years ago, 2 million years ago, more than 2 million years ago, and 120 million years ago. So that's the qualification of a spiritual master. Now, how can you recognize if the spiritual master is bona fide or not bona fide? Well, like we said, first and foremost, the spiritual master never says he is God. And the disciples and the spiritual master never lets his disciples say that he's God. And number 3, the spiritual master teaches Bhagavad Gita as it is, just like Prabhupada did, without any speculation, without his own opinion. He simply repeats what Krishna said and what the bona fide acharyas have said in the disciplic succession from Krishna. Then he lives exactly according to those, to what Krishna has said. It's not that he teaches you what Krishna said and he lives in a different way. No, he has to follow himself strictly what Krishna has said. What did Krishna say? He said, well, there are 4 things that you should always do and 4 things that you should never do. So the 4 things that we should never do are meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and intoxication. And the 4 things that we should always do is chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And to only eat Mahaprasadam that's been offered to Krishna. Okay, let's close the doors in the back there. And keep them closed every time someone comes in. Then there are 4 things we should always do. Is chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra, eat only prasadam. Okay, pujaris and other people, I don't want to hear anybody talking. I don't want to hear anybody talking. I don't want to hear anybody talking. So, we should always eat prasadam only, what's been offered to Krishna with love and devotion and offered back as his mercy. We should regularly, every day, hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by genuine devotees, not by phonies. Phonies are people who don't repeat what Krishna said, but give their own opinion. So we're not interested in opinions, we're interested in factual truth. And that is exactly what Krishna has spoken. Then, lastly, to regularly come to the temple and engage in seva, or devotional service. So these are instructions that Krishna gave originally in Bhagavad Gita and kept repeating it every time he spoke Bhagavad Gita. If a person gives up the 4 types or the 4 pillars of sin, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and intoxication, they come very quickly to the mode of goodness. It's only in the mode of goodness, or sattva guna, that one can understand spiritual knowledge. As long as people are in the mode of passion and ignorance, or rajas and tamas, there is no way, absolutely no way, they can understand even one thing about God. One must come to the mode of goodness to begin to understand knowledge of our relationship with God and who God actually is, or who Krishna actually is. So this is why 99.9% of the people in the world are in illusion and are suffering unnecessarily birth, death, old age, and disease, and also eating, sleeping, mating, and defending like animals, because they are not hearing directly Krishna's words, as spoken in Bhagavad Gita and as repeated by the acharyas and bona fide gurus. So because of that lack of knowledge, people suffer unnecessarily birth, death, old age, and disease, and repeatedly go over into different species of life, sometimes in the demigod regions, sometimes in the middle region like the earth, sometimes in Narak, the hellish planets, because they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication. They have false pride, and once one has false pride, they develop the false ego, and they develop many false concepts that mislead them and cause them to unnecessarily suffer. Then, if the devotee decides to become a serious devotee, now there are many different levels of devotees. There's what's called Kanishta Adhikari, there's Madhyama Adhikari, and there's Uttama Adhikari. The neophyte devotees do not strictly follow the regulative principles. Because of that, they do not make tangible spiritual advancement. Although they may chant Hare Krishna to a certain degree, they may follow vegetarianism to a certain degree, or eating only prasadam. Vegetarianism is not necessarily prasadam. Prasadam is food that's prepared and offered to Krishna with love and devotion, and if the offering is done correctly, Krishna offers it back as his prasadam, his mercy. And by eating prasadam and chanting Hare Krishna, you can easily go back to Godhead, easily. And by not engaging in the sinful acts and always engaging in devotional service. The whole purpose of Vedic knowledge is to convince a person to give up sense gratification and take up sense purification. And sense purification is by following the rules and regulations of spiritual life, the don'ts and the do's, and to chant sincerely the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra at least 16 good rounds on 108 beads every day. These are minimum requirements for becoming a devotee, but there's no limit to how much you can chant Hare Krishna or how much you can hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and respect prasadam, and learn to preach Krishna consciousness to others, to help others also understand the truth of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal occupational duty of the living entity. Dharma means an occupational duty, just like a mother has an occupational duty to feed her children. A father has an occupational duty to sustain the family. Okay, children have to be quiet. If we follow these rules and regulations, life becomes very easy. Krishna protects us. As it says in Bhagavad Gita, Shinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Bhadrani Vidunati Satam. Krishna says, one who hears about me, or one who hears from me directly through Bhagavad Gita, is engaged in righteous activity. And for one who hears about me, Krishna, who dwells in everyone's heart, becomes very much favorable to that person and blesses them with spiritual knowledge and protects them so that they can remain in Krishna consciousness and makes everything easy for them to go back to Godhead. That is the power of regularly hearing Krishna's words and instructions and following them strictly. It makes life very easy. You're no longer struggling in the material world to make a living, to maintain your family, and plus you're being protected by the Lord Himself. This is the secret to success in human life. Of course, nobody listens to this. They're more interested in making money and wasting their time in frivolous activities and just be worried all the time. When you don't have money, you're worried about making it. When you have a lot of money, you're worried about losing it. So both ways you're worried. But when you engage in Krishna's service, you have absolute faith in the Lord that He's going to protect you. You give up doing anything that's not favorable to devotional service, and you accept doing everything that is favorable for devotional service, and you accept Krishna as your only maintainer. That is, not only He's going to protect you, but He's also going to maintain you by making your life very easy. I've experienced this in 55 years of being in the movement. He's made everything easy for me, and He's always helped me through all kinds of difficulties so that one can practice Krishna consciousness. So I've experienced this 55 years, and I hope to continue experiencing it by following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. You get more freedom by following the rules than by breaking them. By breaking the rules, you get suffering. Just like a young kid who gets a nice car and starts speeding, eventually they take the license away from him. And he has to go without a car. And if he drives without a license, they can seize the car and put him in jail. So you see, following rules, whether they're mundane rules of the state or whether they're spiritual rules given by Lord Krishna, you're a winner. And by not following the rules, you are a loser, and you unnecessarily suffer and experience what's called the struggle for existence. The struggle for existence is going on because people don't follow Krishna's easy instructions. So, it says here, one has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant, without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. So, people that never ask questions never learn anything. But people who ask questions and get their questions answered, they learn things. So just remaining silent all the time is not a good thing. It's a symbol that you're not actually listening. One must listen critically, not critically, but one must listen with devotion and submission and ask significant questions. Tatvidi paripatena paripasnena sevaya. So there's three essential qualifications. Paripatnena, submissiveness. Pariprasnena, asking significant questions. And seva, offering service to the spiritual master. Then the proper atmosphere is created, or environment is created, for questions and answers. At that point, the spiritual master will answer all the questions of the disciple. Now, how does the spiritual master answer questions? He shows where your question was already answered by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, or already answered by previous acharyas in the disciplic succession, or parampara. So there's no question of a personal opinion. If a spiritual master says, I think, or let's assume that, then it's not a spiritual master. Either they know and they can show you where that question was already answered in the past. And every question has already been answered by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and even more detail given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, any Sishya or any disciple has a right to ask at any point, Dear Gurudev, where was that question answered previously by Krishna? And the bona fide spiritual master will be able to show you right away, so that you're sure that what you're hearing is the truth. And there's such a thing called the triangle of verification. Triangles have 3 points, and when they're connected, you have the triangle. So the first point of the triangle of verification is Krishna's original words in Bhagavad Gita. The second point is the acharyas in the disciplic succession who repeat those words that Krishna spoke originally. And the third point of the triangle of verification is the present Guru, who repeats exactly the same things that the acharyas and Krishna have said. Then you can close the triangle, and you know that you're hearing the truth. Now, in the case of Bali Maharaj, his guru, Sukracharya, originally told him the truth. But when Lord Krishna appeared before Bali Maharaj as a dwarf brahmana to receive bhikshu, or to receive the mercy of Bali Maharaj, at that point, Sukracharya said, don't give this midget brahmana anything. He's actually Krishna, and he's going to take everything away from you. So this put Bali Maharaj in a dilemma, because now his guru violated the sacred rule that a bona fide guru simply repeats what Krishna has said. So previously, Bali Maharaj did tell, Sukracharya did tell Bali Maharaj that all sacrifices are meant for the pleasure of Krishna. But now he was saying, this is Krishna appearing in this special form as a dwarf brahmana. Don't give him anything. So Bali Maharaj was not able to close the triangle, and therefore he rejected that instruction from the spiritual master. Now, it is a very serious thing to refuse to follow the spiritual master, except in that situation where the spiritual master violates the sacred principle of simply repeating what Krishna has said. And when he says something contrary to what Krishna has said, that's the only time where the disciple can reject or refuse to follow that instruction. So Sukracharya became very angry, and he cursed Bali Maharaj that he would lose everything he has. And Bali Maharaj smiled. He said, well, if I lose everything I have to this Vamana Dev, this appearance of Krishna, that's the purpose of life. Bhoktaram yagitapasam sarvaloka maheswaram suridam sarvabhutanam yadfamam santin richati. In the 5th chapter, last verse of the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, that Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices. And Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. And he's the owner of everything in the universe, including our body, our mind, our intelligence, including all bodies, including all lands, including all planets. He is Maheshwara, the supreme Ishwara. And Sarva, so it says, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, Sarvaloka, all lokas, all places, everything belongs to him. So if everything belongs to him, then everything should be used in his service. That is real spiritual knowledge. And that's the secret to having an easy, peaceful, and prosperous life and going back to Godhead at the moment of death. The moment of death for a devotee is the best moment in their life. And the moment of death for a materialist is the worst moment of their life. You can see what a major difference there is between following the instructions of Krishna and not following them. By not following them, on his one experiences the struggle for existence always, and at the moment of death, they're horrified to see not Krishna, but Yamaraj, who is going to give them the result of all the sins that they have done, and if they have done some good things also, they get some good results, but they stay in the cycle of birth and death. Whereas the devotee, because of complete surrender to the Lord, when he sees Krishna, he goes back to Godhead. Therefore, there's no more birth, death, old age, and disease. There's no more reproduction because everyone's eternal in the spiritual world. There's no more material body, and one now has a spiritual body. Therefore, there's no more bones and ligaments and tendons and stool and urine, all those things in the body, and blood. The body is made of Sat Chit Ananda Vigraha, eternity, bliss, and transcendental knowledge. So there's a difference between the spiritual body and the material body. Right now, every one of us has the material body, but it's covered over by everybody has a spiritual body, but it's covered by the material body, made of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So, the whole purpose of spiritual life is to engage the material body in the service of the Lord and gradually purify it, and then your spiritual body takes over. And when you leave your body, you return into the spiritual world with your original spiritual body, where there's no more birth, death, old age, and disease. This should be the goal of everyone. But of course, being fooled by modern education, which teaches young kids and adults that there is no scientific validation of the existence of God. Therefore, scientists ignore God, and knowledge of God is not taught in public schools. And number two, when you die, everything is over. There's nothing after death. There's no such thing as karma. There's no such thing as reincarnation. So all these are junk theories, and they're basically lies, all meant to stop you from having a chance of liberating yourself from the cycle of birth and death, and condemning people in that ignorance to remain permanently eating, sleeping, mating, and defending like animals, and repeating over and over again birth, old age, disease, and death. So, a bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student or disciple is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries or questions become perfect. Now, the symptom of a person who is ignorant is they never ask any questions. They remain like a log, and and it's not even sure they're listening. When you listen carefully and with submissiveness, you will have many questions to ask, because there are many questions. What happens? Why is there evil in this world? What happens after I die? what should I be doing in this lifetime? There are millions of questions to ask, but people don't ask questions because their mind is dull, and all they're doing is thinking about making money and spending the money, right? And they're worried about politics, they're worried about the Ukraine war, they're worried about crazy Joe Biden, they're worried about this, they're worried about that, and it's unending, all the things they worry about. And they go from one worry to another. That is not life. That is a sign of ignorance. Whereas if you become a genuine devotee, the only thing you have to worry about is following the rules and regulations of spiritual life strictly. And the more you do it strictly, the more you make spiritual advancement, and the easier your life becomes. So, there are two sets of laws that we have to follow. There are laws of the state and the laws given by God. If you follow all the laws of the state, you get a lot of freedom. If you break them, your freedom becomes compromised. And if you keep breaking the laws, you can end up in jail. If you keep breaking the laws in jail, you can end up in solitary confinement. So the more we violate the laws of the country, the more our freedoms are taken away from us. Now, but there's a second set of laws that we have to follow. Those are the laws given by Krishna. Now, when we don't follow Krishna's laws, we become trapped in the cycle of birth and death. And there's 8,400,000 different species of bodies that we can get. To come to the human form of body, we have already gone through 8 million species. That means we were aquatics, we were plants, we were reptiles and bugs, we were birds, we were mammals, until we come to the human form. And then in the human form, there are 400,000 species, and most of them are not civilized. There are very few human beings that are actually civilized. What is the difference between an uncivilized human being and a civilized human being? The uncivilized human being is not regulated in their activities. They're not regulated in their eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. They can do these things any time of the day in excess or not. They become addicted to bad habits. And they're always trying to catch up rather than being organized. And they might not be bathing regularly and so forth. And because of that, they get sick easily and they suffer unnecessarily. Those persons who are regulated, they're capable of making spiritual advancement. And if they're regulated, usually they get good education, they get good jobs, and they seem to make progress materially. But if you're regulated for spiritual life, you make tremendous progress spiritually, which is different than the material progress. The material progress just keeps us entangled in the material world of birth, death, old age, and disease. The spiritual progress liberates us from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. That should be the concern of every parent. Not only that they, mother and father, work together to develop their spiritual life, at the same time maintain their family, and at the same time educate their children in genuine knowledge, not the junk knowledge that's taught in schools. The schools are teaching your kids to become perverts, not what you would call devotees. They teach your kids to become materialists so that they can be exploited by people like Jeff Bezos and other people like that. They become consumers, and they consume things that are not necessary. And they have to work very hard to buy all those unnecessary things, you see. So the devotee's life is one of being a minimalist. They don't eat too much. They don't sleep too much. They don't sleep too little. They don't eat too little. They're balanced. They're organized. And they use their time effectively to make spiritual advancement by dovetailing all their activities into Krishna consciousness. Dovetailing means that you can be Krishna conscious in any position of life, whether you're poor, whether you're ignorant, whether you're rich, whether you're intelligent. Everybody can make tangible spiritual progress if they follow the rules and regulations of spiritual life. So therefore, giving up the 4 things we should never do and accepting the 4 things we should always do makes any person, even an ignorant person who doesn't even know how to read and write, they can all become pure devotees and go back to Godhead. This is real equality, not based on the body, not based on birth, but based on the activities that you engage in and the good qualities that you develop by those spiritual activities. So then, in the next verse, text 36, it says, Apichet asipapebhya sarvebhya papakrita tama sarvam jnana plavenaiva vijinam santarishyasi. Even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. And in the explanation, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada explains, proper understanding of one's constitutional position in relationship to Krishna is so nice that it can at once lift one from the struggle for existence which goes on in the ocean of ignorance. So, ignorance, this is called tamasa buddhi, intelligence and ignorance. So someone like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or the different Larrys, Larry Ellison, Larry this, Larry that, they're all intelligent in ignorance. They're producing different things like cars and programs and AI and IT, all these things, just to keep people in ignorance, to work hard and make them rich, and keep the other people working like donkeys, making them richer and richer. So this is a problem because they have this rule. Every year they have to lay off minimum 10% of the workforce just to scare the heck out of everyone else to work really hard. So they have all these techniques. Previously there was what you would call serfs and indentured servants. Nowadays you have the same thing, but it's done by reward and punishment. So when you work, sometimes you get rewarded and sometimes you get punished by being laid off. These are all techniques of how to keep people in slavery, working their butts off day and night, trying to make somebody else rich. And they also make money, but they're also in anxiety because anytime, just like now, they're advertising how AI is going to knock out 80% of the IT workforce. This is Mr. Khosla, who, by the way, is an Indian, but he said recently that AI, artificial intelligence, will make 80% of the workforce unnecessary. And he said, and I'm excited. What? You're excited that 80% of your workers will be laid off? Yeah, he's excited because he's going to make more money. He doesn't have to pay for their vacations and their Medicare, this thing and that thing. So, because robots can work 24 hours a day. So we see how greedy and how malicious and how lack of mercy these people are. The bottom line is simply money. And if they're in a position of exploitation, they don't care about other people. So this is not life. This is not what society should be like. And then there are all these phony ideas, gender neutrality and cross-dressing and changing gender without the permission of the parents and so forth. All the crazy ideas, defund the police and let criminals, I know you don't know this, I'm going to explain something to you. The general law in Washington State is if a person commits a crime over $750, they get prosecuted. But King County changed that. So now the law in King County is $5,000. In other words, a person can rip off $5,000 from you, and they will not be prosecuted. They'll be let off. Did you know that? Yeah. I got that directly from a chief of police 2 weeks ago when I asked the question. I said, how come, these people commit $1,000 crime and the judge lets them off? He said, no, now it's $5,000. See, you didn't know that, right? Now you have a chance to vote or not vote for some people who have made laws like that. This is crazy, right? But this is going on in society today. And you're seeing it right in front of your eyes, right? And a lot of people are unnecessarily suffering, especially people who work hard. Like, for example, if you have a rental house, someone can become a squatter and you can't throw them out of the house legally. You would have to go to court, and the courts are overburdened with many, many cases. So it could take you 1.5 to 3 years to be able to legally evict the squatter from your house. See? So all these things are going on. They've cropped up in the last 5 years. And don't think that because you live in Sammamish, and this is a relatively safe place, that you will not see these things. It's coming here very soon. It's not just in downtown Seattle. It's all over the state now, especially when the criminals find out that they can get away with $5,000 theft and not be prosecuted. See, does that make sense? No. So there are many things that don't make sense today, and we should not be ignorant of these things. We should understand what's happening. What's happening is you all had to go through a lot of trouble to get a permit to come to the United States, to get a green card, and eventually maybe become a citizen. Nowadays, people just walk across the border in the southern United States. They don't have to have any medical examination. They might be criminals, it doesn't matter. And they get free housing, they get free medical care, they get free education for their kids, and they get jobs. Does that make sense? How long did it take you to come to this country, Prabhu? Huh? Many years, right? You had to follow all the rules. Nowadays, millions of people are walking across the border in Mexico without going through anything. And as soon as they come, they get rewarded. Does that make sense? You should think about these things. This is what's happening to this country right now. So the main thing is not that. The main thing is we are all going to experience birth. We've all experienced that already. Old age, we're experiencing that gradually. Disease, we'd experience a lot of that. And finally, death. What's your plan? Do you have a plan about that? About how you can mitigate all those things or how you can become free of it? No. No one's thinking seriously like that. Therefore, it's very important to have spiritual education by which you can solve the real problems of life. The real problems of life are not military, they're not economic, they're not political, they're not social. The real problem of life is birth, old age, disease, and death. That's what we should focus on. That's what we should teach our kids to focus on. Then you can be a successful human being who, at the moment of death, you go back to Godhead. You go back to the spiritual world where we all came from. Okay, so it says, and we'll end with this. So, are you ever going to do this program, or we're just going to keep? You're just going to keep doing things. When are you going to start? When are you going to start? Okay. So today we are celebrating the Vyasa Puja Jayapataka Maharaj. I have something very interesting to explain about him. He's a very exalted devotee. And in 19th of December 1972, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, wrote him a letter. And in that letter he said, "Please accept my blessings. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter dated November 29th, 1972, and I have noted the contents with pleasure. I am so much happy to hear from you all the good news of our Mayapur Center in India. And I want to tell you, your liking the engagement there is not at all an inappropriate attachment. Rather, it is your qualification for pleasing your spiritual master. Attachment must be there for Krishna or for Maya or illusion. So you have become attached to developing the Mayapur Center. That is Krishna's work. So Krishna appreciates very much when his devotee becomes attached to him in this way. Yes, the cooperative spirit of working together without any argument is especially prominent in Mayapur, more than other places in India. So this is one symptom of spiritual life. In spiritual life, people cooperate with each other. People support each other. People help each other make spiritual advancement. And in material life, people are subversive to each other. You probably experienced this in the culture of major companies. There's often ferocious competition, even in the same team, where people make advancement by stepping on someone and promoting themselves. But in the spiritual world, there is willful cooperation. There's what you call para upakar, which means doing good to others, not being selfish, and being submissive and tolerant, and being empathetic and compassionate. All these good qualities develop by following the rules and regulations of spiritual life. So here, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is thanking Jayapataka Maharaj for managing the Mayapur temple, which is the headquarters of the Hare Krishna movement in India and the world. He's thanking him that there is no fighting amongst the devotees. They're working cooperatively together. They're happy, and they're making a lot of spiritual progress, and they're building up this world center. And so he says, yes, the cooperative spirit of working together without any argument is especially prominent in Mayapur more than in other places in India. Therefore, you are successful, and the work is going on quickly to completion. That is because all of you working there have become very much attached to the dust from Lord Chaitanya's or Krishna's lotus feet. And because you have got such deep personal interest with that engagement of work or service, you want to see that it is done nicely without any hindrance of selfish motivation. Never mind all kinds of conditions of the material nature. That idea has become prominent for all of you. It is bigger than Maya's idea. Therefore, to make you quarrel or other things. But you especially are to take the credit. So he's addressing Jayapataka Maharaj directly. But you especially are to take the credit. From the very beginning, you wanted that place. In other words, Jayapataka Maharaj, although he was an American citizen, after he went to India, he eventually became an Indian citizen, gave up his American citizenship, and has never left. 50 years working to develop the Mayapur project, which is the headquarters of Krishna consciousness in the world. He says, the idea has become prominent for all of you. It is bigger than Maya's idea, and therefore Maya cannot interfere to make you quarrel or other things. But you especially are to take the credit. From the very beginning, you wanted that place, and you got the land, got the money from me, and now you have built the place by your concentration of energy. That is wanted. If there is some discrepancy anywhere, some non-cooperation, fighting, or if the work is slow or not to the standard, it is to be supposed that the person or persons in charge are not very much attached to Krishna. That means they will discriminate. My engagement is not good, they say. Others' engagement is good, they say. Like that. They do not know the secret of surrendering to Krishna. Such surrendered devotee sees that everything is part of Krishna's plan, that whatever is meant to be, I am doing that, so let me do it with my full attention to every detail. Let me become absorbed in such service, never mind what it is, but let all other considerations be forgotten, and only my desire to do the thing best for Krishna's sake alone and for his pleasure should be my motive. That is advanced stage of understanding devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much for your kindly coming to the point of pure Krishna consciousness. So here we see the Guru, Srila Prabhupada, glorifying his disciple, Jayapataka Maharaj, for his sincere service. Now, Jayapataka Maharaj is not a CEO. He's not a shareholder. He's devotee. So he does not get rich by doing the service. He follows all the rules, just like anybody else. He lives a minimalist life, which means you don't eat too much, you don't sleep too much, you don't argue, you're always kind and gentle, empathetic, compassionate. You follow the rules and regulations strictly. So he's teaching by example of humility and pridelessness and 100% engagement with focus on achieving the goal. And the goals are, well, as soon as you finish one goal, you go to the next goal. You go one by one from beginning to end, and then you start the next project. So this is what he's been doing for 50 years in Mayapur. Mayapur, when I first went there, there was only one building there. Now there's a huge number of buildings there. It's building up into a big city of over 50,000 people. That's because Jayapataka Maharaj has been there all this time, and obviously one person can't do that. So he's able to, he has up to 50,000 disciples. You know, that's a big number, 50,000 disciples. And he did that by being a paradigm of humility and service to Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. So this is what happens. He's not a PhD. He's not a big manufacturer of anything. He's simply a devotee, just like Prabhupada. He came to America with $7 in his pocket in 1965, and in 11 years he built this gigantic movement and went back to Godhead. So Prabhupada or Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, is the most successful Indian that's ever come to the West. Much more successful than Vivekananda or many of the other gurus that have come. And his movement is still growing vastly all over the world, in at least over 150 countries. So that means that he is the most successful Indian, right? And why? Because he was the most surrendered Indian to the will of Krishna. Now, if you surrender to Elon Musk, it's not the same thing as surrendering to Krishna. The more you surrender to Krishna, the more you become humble and serious about spiritual life, and you're able to convince many other people also to become serious about spiritual life. So it's different than becoming surrendered to Elon Musk. You might become rich, but you're always thinking about money rather than always thinking about God. So now let's take a look at some examples. For example, Mr. Trump, he thought that by economic development he would be reelected president for a second time. But a little virus called COVID destroyed all his plan. See, and it stopped for a certain period of time the American economic development. So we see how tenuous economics are in this world. That's not the solution to the problems of society. The problems of society can be solved very easily if people give up those 4 pillars of sin: meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and intoxication. If they give up those things, they can easily make tangible progress economically, socially, and in every aspect of life. But those 4 things have become part of American culture. If you try and convince a person, whether they're from India or whether they're born in the United States, to give up meat eating, they'll argue with you. They'll say, no, we have to have protein, and so forth. They make up all these phony arguments. But if Krishna said give it up, that means it's something very negative. Now, if you look at that second panel there, you'll see the statistics that every year almost 1 million people die of overdoses of drugs. Every year about 1.4 million people die of cancer, heart attack, and other diseases caused by meat eating. And every year so many people die of sexual diseases. There's AIDS, and there's so many different diseases. All of them are on the panel. And then people also die from gambling and speculation. So if people give these things up, their life becomes very easy. They become promoted to the mode of goodness, and Krishna will protect you and make everything easy for you. This should be taught to your kids. This should be followed by the parents. This will solve many problems, social, economic, political, and so forth in life. Okay, so now I think we're ready for the program. Is that right? So are there any questions anyone would like to ask? Any questions? Nobody has a question. That means nobody listened carefully. But we have a rule: no questions, no eat. So there has to be one question before we can go forward with the program. Anybody have a question? Okay, there's so many initiated devotees here. No initiated devotees have a question? That's a sign of ignorance. Huh? I guess nobody wants to eat anything tonight.
Sorry, no, I just came at the end of the lecture, so I was not here. So, I know Jayapataka Maharaj gave his life to uh, Srila Prabhupada. Not only him, many other devotees at that time. We don't see that much of commitment nowadays. Like where they can give up everything and join at the age 19, 20. So what changed so much from that generation to this generation?
Nothing changed. It's just people are not educated spiritually, even though they're initiated. They don't come to class regularly. That's one symptom. And number two, they are in illusion about what is success in life. They think success in life is becoming a programmer, and you start off with $150,000 salary. That's not success. That's just entrapping you in a lifetime of serfdom. It's another type of what you would call slavery, where you're working day and night to make somebody else rich. And because you get some pittance of riches, you think that you're doing the right thing. But actually, you're going deeper and deeper into ignorance by that, what you would call struggle for existence. Right? And then when you hear that your company's laying off 10,000 people, you get extremely, stressed, right? Some people even die because of, how they're going to pay the mortgage, how they're going to pay for the kids' education, all these things. You see, so this is not a sustainable model. Right? So it doesn't matter you're initiated or not initiated in Krishna consciousness. We're still strongly influenced by ignorance. And we don't realize at any moment we can die. So are you ready to die in the next minute? No. You're expecting to live. I'm expecting to live. We have this illusion that I can live another 10 years or 20 years or 50 years. So therefore, we're not so concerned about strictly pushing forward Krishna consciousness. But Krishna consciousness is the only solution to this problem, because it's a sustainable model. What is the sustainable model? 1,000 years ago, India was the richest country in the world. There was no IT, there was no AI, there were no factories, there was no manufacturing. How did it become such a rich country? How do we know it's a rich country? Well, because Alexander the Great invaded India. Muhammad Ghazni invaded India with the Persians. And then the Afghanis, the Pathans, invaded India. Then the British invaded India, right? So why did they invade India? Why didn't they invade, Siberia or Russia? Why did they invade India? Because India was the richest country in the world. Now, how did it get so rich? They had a higher technology. And Indians have forgotten what that technology is. But if you read Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, verses 10 to 12, that higher technology is explained. What is that higher technology? Well, you get the Bhagavad Gita and you read verses 3rd chapter, verses 10 to 12, and you'll find out what that higher technology is that made India so rich, that made the people happy. They used to live with 4 or 5 generations of family in the same compound, and they would all be cooperating with each other. Their kids were educated to learn the techniques of self-sufficiency that their parents knew, and they were following Sanatan Dharma, and when they died, they went back to Godhead. It was a wonderful culture. It was very, very opulent. Opulence means you live at home without debt. That's opulence. And you have no worries. Is anybody interested in learning this higher technology? No, none of you are interested in it. Therefore, you're going to be living, even though you're chanting and everything, you're going to be living in anxiety, in the struggle for existence. See? And that's called ignorance, unnecessarily suffering, unnecessarily working like a donkey to make somebody else rich. So you have to wake up and become educated. You have to learn what is the higher technology that made India so rich, made it such a happy place, a peaceful place, and made it so that you could go back to Godhead at the moment of death. So, take a look at 3rd chapter, 10th to 12th verse. In 2 little verses, the solution to all problems, how to live happily, how to live prosperously, and how to go back to Godhead easily.
Maharaj, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Can you speak louder?
I have a question. So we just heard how Prabhupada sent a letter to Jayapataka Maharaj to bless him.
Yes.
And also you explained how he left US. And
How what?
America, left US to reach India.
Yeah.
And then he dedicated his life in Mayapur completely in Krishna service. But I think somewhere in 2000s he got a stroke and he got paralyzed, right? And since then he has been dependent on.
No, if that happened, it's because of the offenses of his disciples. But he's still alive, in spite of it.
But he's alive. But he's been suffering for more than a decade. Right? So how do we understand that?
How long have you been suffering? You tell me.
No, but he's been paralyzed.
You've been suffering more than a decade. You see? No, don't look at he's suffering in a decade. Look at he has not given up. He just came to America 3 days ago. Does it look like he's suffering? He's traveling around the world preaching because he hasn't given up. His engagement in devotional service overrides bodily suffering. These are things you don't understand. You haven't enough experience yet in Krishna consciousness to understand it. But you can get it if you're serious. So you read 3rd chapter, verses 10 to 12. Any other questions? You have a question? Let's give her a microphone. This is the equal opportunity microphone.
Hare Krishna.
Speak louder, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. When we have something comes in our life, we say that it's from the past life, because of that we are suffering in this. But
it can be from this life also.
Yes, it could be this life also. But just now you said for the Maharaj that it's because of the disciples, and I understand that. But because he's been so much into spiritual, advanced into spiritual life, does it mean that some of the past karma has been cancelled for Maharaj for this life? Because whatever he's suffering, could it be because of his past life thing, or it just purely because of the disciples?
See, the ustadi business, becoming a guru, is very dangerous. Because if your disciples do not follow strictly, it impacts the guru. So the guru has to be strictly following himself, and the disciples have to be strictly following. Now imagine if you had 50,000 disciples. What do you think would happen to you? What do you think would happen to you if you had 50,000 initiated disciples as a guru?
Can't even think.
The same thing, right? Maybe. When Srila Prabhupada got very sick, he said it was because of the disciples were not following strictly. But that hasn't stopped Jayapataka Maharaj. In spite of all the bodily aches and pains and problems he's had, he's continuing his devotional service. So that means that Krishna is protecting him, in spite of his disciples' travails or whatever. So that's what you have to see. You have to. There's a principle in Krishna consciousness that says, judge from the result. So the result is, although his body is beladen with different diseases and so forth, he's still engaged in devotional service. That means he's being protected by Krishna, in spite of all the disciples he has, and if the disciples are following or not following the instructions, he's still being protected by Krishna. Therefore, he's able to continue in devotional service. That's a miracle. That's the sign that there is such a thing as God's protection. We saw that with Bhisma Pitamaha. He was anchored to the ground by the arrows of Arjuna, and he stayed in that position for at least a month or more, to the point where he no longer had any blood. It was just bones, but still he was alive. And in that condition, he spoke the Vishnu Sahasram Sotram and Raja Dharma and so many things to Yudhisthira. And then when he chose to leave his body, he had complete control over that. He left. So you see, the protection of Krishna is not something material. It's a spiritual thing. And we can see the same type of thing going on with Jayapataka Maharaj. He's being protected by Krishna in spite of having a body that's more or less dysfunctional. But it's not stopping him. So these are examples we can see with our eyes. So we should learn from that the importance of being Krishna conscious. That's the solution to all problems of life. Okay, we'll stop right there now. Thank you very much. And now you can eat.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Shadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala
কতি সদমা বন্দময়ী দানা মাতে বন্দময়ী সাবদানা মাতে যাহার প্রসাদে বাই এ বাবত রিয়া যায় যাহার প্রসাদে বাই এ বাবত রিয়া যায় কৃষ্ণ প্রাপ্তি হয় যাহা হইতে কৃষ্ণ প্রাপ্তি হয় যাহা হইতে গুরুমুখ পদ্মবাক্য চিত্তে কো ইয়াক গুরুমুখ পদ্মবাক্য চিত্তে কো রিয়াক আরণ করিয় মনে আশা আরণ করিয় মনে আশা শ্রী গুরু চরণের রতি এই সেই উত্তম গতি শ্রী গুরু চরণের রতি এই সেই উত্তম গতি যে প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা যে প্রসাদে পুরে সর্ব আশা चक्षुदान दिल जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिल जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित ओ दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित प्रेम भक्ति जहाते अविद विनाश जाते प्रेम भक्ति जाते अविद विनाश जाते गाय जहार चरित्र ও বেদে গায় যার চরিত্র শ্রী গুরু করুণা সিন্ধু আদাম জনার বন্ধু শ্রী গুরু করুণা সিন্ধু আদাম জনার বন্ধু লোকনাথ লোকের জীবন ও লোকনাথ লোকের জীবন ও প্রভুপাদ লোকের জীবন আহা প্রভু কর দয়া দেহ মরে পদচয়া আহা প্রভু কর দয়া দেহ মরে পদচয়া এবে যশ গুচ্ছ ত্রিভুবন ও এবে যশ গুচ্ছ ত্রিভুবন প্রভুপাদ পতিত পাবন গুরুদেব লইলু শরণ জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 জয় প্রভুপাদ জয় গুরুদেবা 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 জয় গুরুদেবা জয় জয় গুরুদেব 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 নমো বিষ্ণুপদায় কৃষ্ণপ্রেষ্ঠায় ভূতলে শ্রীমতে জয়পতাকা স্বামী নীতি নামিনে নমো আচার্যপদায় নিতাই কৃপাপদায়িনে গৌরকথা দামদায় নগর গ্রামতারিণে আচার্যপদায় নিতাই কৃপাপদায়িনে গৌরকথা ধামদায় নগর গ্রাম নমো বিষ্ণুপদায় কৃষ্ণপ্রেষ্ঠায় ভূতলে শ্রীমতে ভক্তি বেদান্ত স্বামী নীতি নামিনে नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी प्रशांत देशतारिणे Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaurango, Nitai Gaurango, Nitai Gaurango, Gaura Hare. Nitai Gaurango, Nitai Gaurango, Nitai Gaurango, Gaura Hare. Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare, Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare. Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare, Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare. Mayapura Chandra Jaya Gaura Hare, Mayapura Chandra Jaya Gaura Hare. Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare, Gaura, Gaura, Gaura Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jayapataka Swami Guru Deva, Jayapataka Swami Guru Deva. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Onita Gora Haribol, 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 Haribol. Nitai Gora Haribol, 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 Haribol. Nitai Gora Haribol, 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 Haribol. Haribol, Haribol. Jayam Bhishmapad Paramahamsa Prabhupada Shishya Mata Bhajam Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त बिंद की राधा कृष्ण गौ गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की निथाय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरे हरे all glory simple devotees all glory simple devotees all glory simple devotees
Hare Krishna.
श्री श्री जयपताका स्वामी गुरु महाराज आविर्भाव महाउत्सव की निथाय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरे हरे बोल।
Can you do it? Huh? You can?
Everyone please stand up for the Pushpanjali. I want the mic to be fixed. That's okay.
Sorry, give it to him. I'll take it from him.
Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine Namo Vishnupadaya कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिसिद्धान्त सरस्वती इति नामिने श्रीवृषभानुवी देवी दयितये कृपाब्दये कृष्ण संबंध विज्ञान दायिने प्रभवे नमः। माधुरुज्ज्वल प्रेमाद्य श्रीरूपानुग भक्तिदा श्रीगौर करुणाशक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते। नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दीनतारिणे। रूपानुग विधुराप अपसिद्धांत द्वंतहारिणे। नमो गौर किशोराय साक्षात् वैराग्यमूर्तये विप्रलंबरसाम्बुदे पदाम्बुधाय ते नमः। नमो भक्ति विनोदाय सच्चिदानंदनामिने गौरशक्ति स्वरूपाय रूपानुगवरायते। गौरवीर्भावभूमेस्त्वं निर्देस्त्व सज्जन प्रियः वैष्णवा सर्वभौमा श्री जगन्नाथाय ते नमः। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णा प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतस्वे नमः। पंचतत्वात्मं कृष्णं भक्तरूप स्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। जयतां सुरतोर्पंगोर मम मंदेर्मतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्य पदाम्बोजो राधा मदन मोहनो दिव्यद्वृन्दारण्य कल्पद्रुमादः श्रीमद्रत्नागार सिंहासनस्थितो श्रीमद्राधा श्रीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेष्ठालिभिः सेव्यमानो स्मरामि। श्रीमान् रासरसारम्भी वंशीवटतटस्थितः कर्षन्वेणुर्स्वनैर्गोपीर् गोपीनाथ श्रीष्टुना तप्तकाञ्चन गौरांगी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुस्तुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते जयपताका स्वामी नित्यनामिने। नमो आचार्य पादाय निताय कृपा प्रदायिने गौरकथा दामदाय नगरग्राम तारिणे। एष पुष्पांजलि समर्पयामि।
कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जय हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे,
हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे,
हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे, कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण
नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते जयपताका स्वामी नित्यनामिने नमो आचार्य पदाय निताय कृपा प्रदायिने गौरकथा दामोदाय नगरग्राम तारिणे एष पुष्पांजलि समर्पयामि।
राम राम हरे कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम
राम राम हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे,
नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते जयपताका स्वामी नित्यनामिने नमो आचार्यपादाय निताय कृपा प्रदायिने गौरकथा दामदाय नगरग्राम तारिणे एष पुष्पाञ्जले समर्पयामि।
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। जयपताका स्वामी महाराज की जय।